Henry Moore is beyond all doubt the most eminent living sculptor in the entire world. It's an extraordinary thing to say of anyone, but there's no doubt whatsoever about the singular position he occupies. He's been working a long time. He became 85 years of age in July 1983, and huge comprehensive exhibitions of his life's work have been held in Florence, London, Paris, New York. In the grounds around his home in Hertfordshire, there are 9 studios and a whole staff cataloguing, preparing archives, looking after visiting experts and groups, setting up exhibitions. There were 34 Henry Moore exhibitions somewhere in the world last year. Tel Aviv, South Korea, Mexico City, Los Angeles, Caracas, 34 all told. There'll be over 40 this year. Henry Moore, meanwhile, remains himself in the middle of all this, a man who lives for and by his work.
I think all artists have favourite subject matter. I mean, not every painter is a portraitist. Some prefer landscape and become like Turner landscape artists. Other painters will be still life, yes, the arrangement and so on. And you'll find that all artists have favourite subject. I think it became the important object to study and to understand was when I was full-time at art school, when I got my scholarship. But before then I'd drawn people and so on in subject matter, but not the nude. But when it came to studying as a sculpture student, 3 and 4 days every week was spent looking at the human figure, modelling it, basing one's drawings upon it, and there it is. And I'm very pleased it's like that, because I think that all our architecture and all our is built on the fact that we're between 5 and 6 feet high, that we stand upright, that we're on 2 legs and not 4, all these things. And so we must study ourselves. I think there are 3 main, whatever you like to, subjects, yes, that I use continuously. The reclining figure is, I think, as you say, the most generally comes to mind and used. It is, and it's based, of course, all of them, on the human figure, which I think is our basic understanding of nature, because our bodies are what they are. If we weren't upright and on two legs and could balance ourselves, if we had four legs like a horse and could go to sleep on four legs, our sense of architecture and everything else would, and our use of architecture, our buildings, everything, our beds, our tables, our everything, all the objects would all be different. So it's because, therefore, the human figure controls what the world to us, and what man's making for his own use is based on what we are built like, what we are. And therefore, for me, and I think it should be for architects, the human figure is what controls the use of so that human beings can relate themselves. To begin with, in the early stages, I believed that a work in stone, ipso facto, because it was in stone, was better than a work in clay. Yes. It's wrong. It isn't. It's the vision of the person that makes it that comes through. And if that vision is a unique one, adding something to the whole history of that's the important thing. When I did begin studying past sculpture and primitive sculpture in the British Museum, most of the early sculpture is carved sculpture, produced from a piece of wood or a stone or so on. And I believe then that direct carving, which came into fashion with a few sculptors, world sculptors, like Epstein, Brancusi, Giacometti, and a few, all believed that something made direct in the material was what gave sculpture its kind of integrity.
Yes.
And so to begin with, I thought that something in stone or wood
should be carved.
That a carved object was better sculpture than a model one. I don't believe that anymore. No. I think what makes a sculpture great is the mind behind it, and the outlook and the vision, not the material. But of course, a person must have a realistic understanding of materials. Otherwise, he might be spending a lot of time trying to do something in one material, which would be easily done and save. He could make his life spent solving a problem that needn't be there.
Yes, because you have done a lot of carving since.
Yeah.
Yes.
But now I don't mind whether the material, whether it's modelled intending to be made permanent in bronze, or whether it's carved or so on. I think the material should be understood, of course, because it would be stupid. It would be stupid to try and make a table, for instance, out of stone with the thin legs that it has.
Yes.
It would be, because it wouldn't last more than a week or two, and then it would break. We've all got common sense, or should have it. You see, the Greeks, the early Greeks, and the later Greeks, when they made a standing figure in stone, they knew that it was likely, as they carved it, to break at the ankles if it was absolutely realistic. So they put a tree trunk up the back of the ankle to make it and so on. But this was a kind of false solving
device.
A device. And now, because a reclining figure and also a seated figure doesn't pose that problem of the thin ankles supporting everything, because with a seated figure, the chair can do what the figure is seated on can do it. With a reclining figure, there's the elbow, there's the hip, there's the foot, all resting on the end. You can. So it was a practical solution to the problem. When in the early stages of my liking stone carving and thinking it produced better sculpture than modelling, was a bit of puritanical kind of, that if something's difficult,
Yes, yes.
and something gives you a physical, tires you and all this, is morally better for you than something that's easy. This was a kind of, that I didn't want to solve the problem of stone carving by tricks such as the tree trunk and so on. Therefore, I'm saying that reclining figures, because they're supported on three parts, usually the hips, the feet, and the elbow or the back. So you don't need to have these other props included. But then the holes came because the line of least resistance in stone carving, in carving out of a solid material, is to not go very far, because it's more work, it's more difficult. But it becomes an achievement when you have got two sides and you've got to hold connecting the back to the front. It then becomes three-dimensional automatically, because there are two sides, and the whole connects the two sides. This was getting more three-dimensional reality into the carving than the ones that were so solid that they have a back and a front, but not a connection. This is the one in Hyde Park, is a reproduction of the, but first I made it in plaster. This is the plaster.
Yes.
Then from that, I sent that plaster out to my carving studio in Forte dei Marmi in Italy, where I get all my marble. And I didn't carve the whole thing myself because it needed an army of about 5 or 6 of us. But they made a marble copy, which is what happens with all the sculptors. I mean, Rodin and so on.
Yes.
I mean, the big marble ones, he has help. Yes. He has, and we had help over this. And so there is that marble version came from Italy. That's what life is about, is appreciating what a wonderful world we live in, appreciating nature, other human beings and so on. This is why we're so much more gifted by God than animals, who can't discuss and share in the way we can, and therefore we should make the most of that gift that God has given us, sharing the appreciation of people and nature. if we could have any other parts like Scotland, but you can't. A landscape like that is God's gift to sculpture for me. It's unique, it's marvellous. And as soon as I've been up there, I think that this placing of my sculptures by now my great friend Tony Keswick on his estate in Scotland has the best landscape for my sculptures anywhere in the world. Nothing could be better. You might know generally that the landscape will find a spot, but you don't try and do it for it. It isn't like a building in which it has to be placed and you have to know where it's going, whether it's above the frieze or below it, or whether it's in front of the portal or the door, whatever it may be. But a landscape is God's work, not man's work. A king and queen, it's a term for a whole set of ideas of kings and queens throughout the world's history.
Yes.
It's not like a portrait of somebody. You have to make a kind of symbolic version that could be interpreted, yes, in a, and that's what I tried to do. Pre-Columbian sculpture is one of the biggest excitements and influences in my sculptural development. The first time I saw, I think it was a photograph of the Chac Mool, which is in one of the, I think, Mexico City museum. But the Chac Mool is continuing theme and subject. It's their religious symbol, as it were. When I went to Mexico and saw that there were in almost every museum in Mexico has, and they're from very small images. It's like an image that they use. It came with me finding it and first seeing it, came at a period in my career when I thought that stone carving, that sculpture in stone, was just because it was in stone, was better than sculpture in bronze or terracotta or so on, because I was I believed very much in direct carving. Drawing isn't only, in my opinion, useful to express an idea. It is a useful method of making you look more intensely to understand the world and nature.
Yes.
So one draws from objects as well as inventing. The sheep sketchbook, the drawings of sheep, came about because some alteration was being made to my studio, one of the studios down below, and during that period I couldn't I couldn't go on with the sculpture that I was doing. But I have a little studio where I often do little maquettes and ideas. You may have photographed it down below. and I was made to be there. Now that has a window out onto the big field which belongs to me, but which the farmer next door. And because I was being stopped from going on with the sculpture through them having to work in the studio, the builders, I began drawing the sheep. And to begin with, I thought they were just like a ball of wool, as it were, with a head and 4 legs. And it seemed as though there was no shape. But I began to get interested, and fortunately the shearing period came, and instead of them beginning to be balls of wool on 4 legs, their bodies were shaped, and I spent, I don't know how long, 2 to 3 months just drawing sheep. And at the end I knew that they were not just a ball of wool on 4 legs.
Yes.
It's that there is so no, drawing is I would make it, as I think I was saying, I would make it in elementary schools, in all education, the kind of thing. We don't make students learn English or study poetry or Shakespeare or so on because we expect them to be great poets. We do it as part of their, whatever you like to call, education. If I wasn't good at drawing and didn't love it, I wouldn't be a good sculptor. I wouldn't be the sculptor I am. Couldn't be. And that's what I think with everybody. And as I was saying earlier, if somebody tells me there's a young sculptor and they think is good, and I say, what are his drawings like? Oh, they say, oh, they're not much, and so on. Then I know he's not. No. Because if you do like form, drawing is a way of quickly responding to it and trying to get out of it. As I said, the main thing is that it makes you look.
Yes, yes.
People don't look. In the First World War, I don't know how it came about, but there were a few very talented young artists. It's the 1914 war, and someone in the educational world, or whatever it may have been, thought that it was a pity that people like Augustus John or so on should be sent off to the front just to fire a rifle that they weren't good at, yes, instead of their talent being. And they formed what was called the War Artists Association, whatever it was called. And Kenneth Clark revived the idea of it when the Second World War came. Now, in the First World War, I did go to the front at 18.
But not as an artist, as a
soldier. No, just as a... Now, in the Second World War, I was over enlistment age.
Yes.
And I just went on working. But they did renew the war artist idea, and Kenneth Clark was made the chairman of it, and he said, offered me to be employed by the war artists. And in the first part of the war, the so-called phony war part, I said, I've seen soldiers in khaki before, I've seen tanks around, I've seen, what is there? It's nothing
new.
And so I knew I was over age and couldn't be called up, so I went on doing my sculpture. But when in London, Irene and I had a studio in Hampstead, and we used to go in sometimes, but we had a little two-seater, and we'd drive in from Hampstead into Piccadilly and go to the Café Royal, have a meal or whatever it may be, or meet with friends. And we did this one night, and this was then becoming the period when Hitler had realized, I think, that his only chance was to bomb London so badly that we would give in. And that's when the real bombardment of London began. And we knew it was going on, but in Hampstead it wasn't.
Didn't feel it so much.
It wasn't so
you could
evident.
See it.
Yeah.
You could see it.
Oh yes, you could
below,
see it. Yeah. And we were in London one evening, but we'd gone by bus from Hampstead to Piccadilly. I think we went to the Café Royal for a meal, for dinner. And we had to come back by underground. And this was the period that the people in the East End, the majority of people have been told by the government, as it were, to buy an Anderson shelter, put it in your garden, and so on. Well, the East Enders in that part of London, they hadn't the money to buy it. They didn't have a garden either to put it in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but they, in perfectly common sense intelligence, took to the underground as being safer down below than one. And coming back this evening, we had to travel by underground. And this was the first time I'd seen the tubes being used. And there women were undressing their babies on the platform, the trains were still running and so on. And it was like a family life on the platforms in the underground. And I was fascinated by it. And that led me to agree then, because when I got home the next morning, or woke up the next day, I began to try and draw what I'd been seeing. And that led, and K. Clark saw some of these drawings. He said, "Now, Henry, surely you'll agree to be a war artist." I said, "Yes, now there's something that I'm moved by." And that's how I began. But when after 2 or 3 months of that period, when it was all haphazard but very human, the government realised that the undergrounds would be used by the people anyhow.
So they might just as well make it proper.
They made it proper, and they began putting up bunks and so on. Now then, when it became organised, I lost interest.
Yeah.
And for a period I tried to carry on as a war artist through Herbert Reed suggesting that I should go and draw down the coal mines, where I'd been born in that area. My father was a coal miner, and might have been something of the same atmosphere. Well, I went up to Yorkshire and spent about a week or 2 weeks going down the coal mines. But there's not the drama in that. The miners are completely... so after a period, I got used to it like they do. I mean, the coal miners don't think I'm going to my death every day.
Certainly not.
And of course they don't. No. They take it like going to somebody playing football, or I don't know. Yeah. All the great sculptors of the world, the one that I admire, Michelangelo, was a great draftsman. Bernini was a great draftsman.
Pisano
was a great draftsman. Rodin was a great draftsman. Every one of them who's been any good. Because drawing is a shortcut to expressing your form ideas, your three-dimensional ideas, which a sculptor should work in. This is what the difference between sculpture and painting is. That sculpture is something solid, like a piece of nature. A painting is a representation. But drawing is a much quicker means of showing or learning about form than what modelling it is. You should model, of course. I mean, I did as a student 2 years at Leeds School of Art, and then 4 years as a student at the Royal College of Art, in which the main programme was modelling or drawing from life and from the human figure. And I believe too that if somebody can think they can draw but can't draw the human figure, then again they're no good.
They're wrong.
They're
not looking at it properly.
They're untrained. They're not fully trained people. You see, drawing is a science as well as an art. You have to understand how, on a flat surface, you represent three-dimensional form or nature. Now, there are two methods of doing that, or two factors in it. One is perspective, the fact that a thing that's nearer to you looks bigger than something that's further away.
Yes.
I can cover the whole of your body up by putting my hand as near as that. There it only covers up just your shirt. So it's that's all the nearer. Therefore, size and comparative sizes is one. That's perspective. Perspective is merely that something nearer to you looks bigger than if it's further away. It covers more of your vision. Now the other is that you only see form by light. If, I mean, a photograph photographs light. if there's absolutely dark, you'll get nothing. And if we lived in the dark, we wouldn't even look at a drawing. We wouldn't. I mean, we must have now
Light.
So, light, and light shows you what shape it is, as this does. I mean, because with here the light from the front. But for me, if I turn it this and the lights are there, this side of this, if there weren't this window, would be darker than the other side. The light falls on an object and reflects back to the photographer, to the camera, or to the draftsman, to the artist, or to anybody. It reflects back from an object. I mean, now the top of your head is getting more light than your face. And if I were attempting to draw you now in this situation, I'd have to use that.
Is it you who said that if all husbands could draw their wives once or twice a week,
I said everybody should.
that marriages would be better?
No, you'd have a lot of divorces. That's what I said, is you'd have a lot of divorces. Because, no, drawing, even if you're not adept at it, makes you look at an object much more intensely than if you just look and look away then and so on. You think you may have seen it. I mean, you recognize, that's a dog or it's what it, but you probably don't realize just what it would be if you had to draw it. Yes. Drawing is a way of making the ordinary person look more intensely. Now we have, I've said this so many times, but we've got 4 or 5 senses. I've forgotten what they are. But,
they're the usual ones.
Yes, they're the usual ones. But sight is the one which painting and sculpture depends on. If someone were blind, he couldn't appreciate any painting. Of course not. He might appreciate if he were blind sculpture in some way, but it wouldn't be the same. And you have to be a long, long time. And then if he knew what it was with his hands, he might have. Perhaps you could teach a blind person what the human figure was like by him. But you see how difficult it would be. So, just as if a musician like Beethoven can go deaf at the end of his life, but had he been born deaf, there would have been no music, couldn't be. So the arts are for the senses, and we enjoy the world through our senses, or hate it, or get damaged by it, or whatever it is, but it's our senses. And then we try to tell other people, or communicate with other people. That's what we can do, which animals can't do. Mainly we do it, and the greatest asset of all is words.
Yeah.
Words. We can, and you never see 2 cats standing together and meowing at each other with as though they're close not. So that's the human. The arts are there. Sometimes people say to me, "What good?" I remember when I used to carve in the open air in Kent at a cottage we had. A person, we lived up a hill, the last house going up a hill that went into a little wood. And we had a field, and I used to do my carving. That's what taught me to like having my sculpture in the open air and seeing it in the open air. And a passerby stopped, and I could see that there was somebody at the gate, probably about 20 yards away, standing, and I had been there for 5. Then he called out, "Mr. Moore." I said, "Yes." He said, "What good is it, that what you're doing? What good is it?" He couldn't see one toiling away and so on. But
what's
to
it
him,
for?
To him, it was of no purpose in it.
Yeah.
Now I knew that he was a nice person and serious. I'd seen him many times, so I tried to answer. And I said, "Do you have a garden?" And he said yes. I knew he had because he lived down the hill. I said, "What do you grow in it?" And he said, "Vegetables, cabbages, potatoes, so on." I said, "Do you grow any flowers?" He said yes. I said, what good are they? And he said, well, my wife likes them. Yes, that's all right. Yes, fine. Yes, I think the happiest, most useful, valuable gifts that a person can have of all the different gifts possible. I mean, somebody having a gift for music, somebody for painting, somebody for sculpture, somebody for dancing, somebody, all based on the different senses that we've got. But the greatest gift that we can have is a gift for words. I think that words, people with a gift for words have had the biggest influence of all, like Christ, like Shakespeare, like whoever to me, this gift for words is the one quality that we have that animals don't have. Animals do have a smell. Dogs better sense of smell than we've got, but does that make them better in all other ways? A hearing sense for birds may have and learn that, but the one thing we've got that allows us to exchange ideas and help each other are words. And in that sense, I admire literature and the gift for words in a person more than I do somebody who dances well, somebody who even does sculpture well. For me, the words, books, lecturing, sermon, I mean, who had the greatest influence in the world?
Very humble statement from a great sculptor.
No. I mean, who had the greatest influence in the world? Christ. Why? Because he had a gift for words. And he could touch people, move them, and get inside them, and even into their understanding of
He had a gift for life as well.
Oh, yes, but that's it. That's the same. Words is it is. It is. If somebody, a runner, breaking the world record has a gift for life, but he is not, in my opinion, anywhere near, although I have the greatest gift for running in the world, doesn't make him, in my opinion, have the influence that a poet or a novelist. Sculptor's gift is trying to understand and express his feelings about life, real, three-dimensional life. Not, I don't mean just running and being, no, it's the understanding. Why do I think? These are very difficult questions. Why do I think that Michelangelo is one of the greatest human beings, as far as I'm concerned, the world has had? Why? It wasn't so much words in his case. It was an understanding of three-dimensional, of human form, and expressing by his changes and subtleties of this or the other, enlarging and making human life a dignity and a grandeur in it that other artists, Rembrandt's got that too. Rembrandt has this unbelievable humanity, and that's why after Michelangelo, or with Michelangelo, Rembrandt would come into my list, whatever you like to call it, the 10 or what they are. Because I find that Rembrandt never, in his quick sketches or in the final things, never produced a nasty human being in his what, except one. And that's the one that's a portrait of a thief, which was intentionally made nasty. And it has got a nasty human traits in it. But all the other ones, this little sketch that he has, they're good people. He had this, appreciation and belief in humanity. When I did the Madonna and Child for Northampton, which is the first work to be actually have a name and be known as that. I don't mind if some people feel in a mother and child that it has, but if it's just an ordinary mother and child, it's a different, but for it to be a Madonna and child, it has to have some quality that can make you believe that that person was more than an average mother. And this, you don't know how you do it. But when in doing the Northampton, it took me a week before I dare carve the face of the baby. I played around with drawings and ideas, but because once you take in stone too much of, you can't put it back. And it was about a week before I had the courage to start making the child, because I wanted that child to look like a good child that could grow up into good. And there's a difference between just a baby and one that has some, significant life expression in it. And it's not. For that reason, I wouldn't like to do too many. Definitely religious. But as one believes that all life is religious, perhaps one oughtn't to be so frightened. Because I believe, for instance, that Michelangelo, this is one of the qualities that makes me admire him so much and talk about him and mention his name so often. I think that all his works, whatever they're done for, have a religious not magnitude, that's not what magnify, a religious uplift in them that would make people believe that life and human beings are something special. I believe that they should have the capability of moving, that they shouldn't be so stone-like and stuck that you couldn't imagine they could move. But they shouldn't be, in my opinion, because you know that stone isn't alive, that it can't move. So why kind of try to make something what obviously it never can do?
Yes.
And that's the... but movement is a part of that. I don't mind. Bernini or so on, some of the other... Rodin often tried to make movement. And I don't dislike him for that or say that he's... But it's not one of my objectives to make what you know can't move look as though it could.
Tell me about the mother and child as against the Madonna and child.
In my opinion, there is a difference in what we mean, what I mean anyhow. The Madonna and child has to have a quality which lifts it out of... though still keeping human, lifts it out of a kind of obvious person. You've got to believe that if there were a real person with features or figures or those attitudes, that they would be good, rather than jolly or whatever other, amusing or whatever. They will be good people that believe that life was important and with a... that's what I believe that religion is making life, or believing that life is more than what superficially it seems.
If you took an object like that, would you in fact start making studies of it straight away?
No, not immediately. If somebody... now I get friends to, if they find things that think I would be interested in, they bring them to me.
Yes.
I didn't find this, it was found though in the grounds, and one of my, whoever it may be, helpers,
Yes.
brought it to me.
And
Then I look at, because this is the most complicated and marvellous ideas to continually, and all with a kind of reason, but wonderfully inventive, varied yet unified, and all with a purpose. It's beautiful and unbelievable.
Yes, it
I've
is.
done drawings of little
Now,
bits of it.
I found that drawing here.
Yes.
Is that from this?
That is.
Because
that
it
is-
looks as if it is, yes.
That is this part here,
That's right.
taken.
Now that's a
from
sort of
there,
simplified study
yes,
of it.
Yes, and leaving out the part that. Now that is a more
Now,
that's a more pictorial.
That's more like.
Like I
That's
did.
it as well, isn't it?
Yes, that is. Oh yes, that's this drawn a little bit bigger. That's all. And that.
This little tiny dead.
Oh, this is
bird.
lovely. This was found, and it's so gentle, so pathetic, so tender.
Little sparrow.
So it's a dead sparrow, yes. And it has all the, what, pathetic tenderness of, and I couldn't help it. But and
you've got
because what drawing does,
Yes, you have those little drawings.
yes,
there.
well there it is. That's this.
That's it.
It's in the, here are those feet, so on. What drawing does, it makes you register what you're drawing
Yes.
more clearly than if you just look.
Yes.
It's like writing about something. You have to, but it is beautiful, and it's so gentle and tender. This, I've always been interested in bones, as we've looked at many little ones in
Does it
the
turn?
hand. Yes. And at one period I did a set of drawings of bones, and Julian Huxley has been a friend of mine for years and years. And when he saw me, I think I drew something like that, a vertebrae of some animal. And he then told me, he said, Henry, I wonder whether you'd like it, I've got a skull of an elephant. And I've got it he lived in Hampstead, I've got it in the garden, out of doors. He said, I think it's deteriorating a little bit. Would you like it? And without having seen it, I said, yes, I'd love it. And when it came, I was staggered.
Yeah.
Because as a single unit of any living skeleton,
Yes.
and a single part of that skeleton, this elephant's head, is more complicated, got more variations of form, of shapes, and of spaces than any single other unit that I know of. I mean, the human skull is much less complex than that. A horse's skull is much less. We have a hippopotamus up in the studio. None of them has got as much of it. Now, when I came to draw it, I found that I could draw a piece in there, and it had the roundness and this and the shape of that. Or I could take a piece here, or I could take the recession back from the front, down, away, right through over here. Some of it, it's full, it's absolutely full of inventive form, in three-dimensional form. And being bone, it has to be strong, and therefore it's got what sculpture I think should have, a kind of tense possibility of resisting breakage or wearing and so on. But there it is, it's just staggering. I did 30 or 40 etchings, all different, with different views, taking sometimes a part like that on its own, taking another time a part like this, another time taking the further, a little change there, of this form, only there. It's wonderful. When I look at it now, I could go on and find another 40 or 50 different parts that I haven't isolated or drawn. So I don't think I've mentioned or explained the string figures. That was at one time a very exciting idea that came to me, because I don't know how it came, but the effect is like seeing a bird in a cage. You can see through the strings because they're set at a space. And this allowed one to show what form was inside an idea, which you couldn't have done except in that kind of way. And so there was a period of 4 or 5, I mean, it might have been 10 years, in which I did string figures with this idea of making sculpture three-dimensional, obviously three-dimensional. I was talking about painters who had a three-dimensional vision. That is, that some painters are more aware of space and solidity and three dimensions than others, who may only be attracted by colour and by kind of gradations of colour. And I mentioned amongst others that Cézanne, for me, had a truly three-dimensional vision. And I think someone said, what do you mean by that? I said, well, it's really my wife who bought it. It wasn't.
Oh, his wife was it? Yes.
I said, my wife was recently, with my approval and desire to do it, and bought a small Cézanne painting. And I said, it's hung, I think, in the bedroom, or was at that time. And I said, it only looks like a sketch. It's not one of the highly finished paintings. But for me, Cézanne knew what he wanted to express three-dimensionally, and the figures are in space. Not photographically, not like an illusion. And we brought this painting and I showed them. I said I could easily make that into a sculpture in setting. I could put them in relation to each other in space. He said, oh, do it, as a thing to do. So I think I made each of these figures with the painting in front of me in about 10 minutes or so each one. And in half an hour, I'd got the 3 figures in plasticine, which is a quick medium, and arranged them in the order there, and then turned it round and said, look, you see, Cézanne could have thought of this the other way round, or this way, like I've done. Well, that's the reason for this, and since then I've drawn it, and anyhow, it was me trying to prove that I've read that painting three-dimensionally.
And what's more, that you read it properly.
Well, I hope. And once I'd made the figures and put them in their relationship to prove that, to me, they were existing in space,
yes,
in reality, I then made drawings. First, that drawing, I think, which is the figures as Cézanne had them.
Yes.
Cézanne had them. Then, from that, I turned them and thought of the other way round, which we can turn this to, and that there. Now, can we turn that?
We can.
So we can. Hmm?
Yes, we can.
There you are. Now, get it, the two to come the right.
I'm going to do so.
Yes, that's it. There you are. In which the middle figure.
That's right. There she is.
Yes.
That's it.
That's right.
Yes, that's correct.
Now then, we had one in which the standing figure was in that position. No, first I made, I think, a drawing of the standing figure from my bronze.
That's that one.
From the little.
There she
bottle.
is.
Yes, there
yes.
she is.
Right.
And then I think we went.
That's the view that Cézanne did not see.
No. But But
the view that you
I
got.
can
Sure.
get
That's
from
right.
his painting
Exactly.
to prove that he was seeing
That's right.
3 dimensions.
That's right.
Then I think came one like that, in which that figure, which
She's
is
to the side. There she is.
there. Is that it?
That's
from
right.
there?
Yes, it is.
And here's just to prove again, in which we have this figure at the back, I think. There. That comes in the middle. Is that it?
Yes, that
on
is
this
it.
side?
Yes,
That's
that is it. That is it.
Which is the...
But that's not the. That's right. That's the other way around. It was that was the original work.
Yes.
As far as the picture was concerned.
That's right. Yeah. There we are. Well, that is... I
Well,
did
there
that
can be-
for my
there-
own... Yes, I
There
did
can be
that
few
for my...
people. There can be few people who understand that picture as well as you do.
I love it. And
How can you not?
Yeah. And I've looked at it, I don't know, thousands of times. So, because he's one of the greats, of course. And there are several painters, great painters. And sculptors don't always know 3 dimensions as well as the good painters. Because sometimes sculptors, or if you're told of somebody as being a good sculptor, but he can't draw, you can dismiss him.
All right.
Because drawing is understanding space, and Cézanne could understand it. When you see drawing to Cézanne, a Mont Saint-Victoire, which he drew from his garden, you know it's 2 miles away.
Yes. And
From his eyes, yes, and there we are. This was an enjoyable experiment that I did to prove that Cézanne, to me, was 3-dimensional. Surrealism meant a lot to me, of course, because it was one of the most inventive and new approaches to both art and literature, everything. It was a kind of opening out and a release. And I welcomed it, of course, and I was looked upon it once or twice as though I was wholly, I was influenced, of course. Of course, the subconscious, and it has a lot to do with our lives, and this attempt to understand our makeup, our development, our human, is very important and should come into painting and sculpture and poetry and fiction, and all of course it should. Surrealism gave a freedom to artists to experiment and invent. Yes, I've lived, thank goodness, in a period when there have been some very, very important artists. Now the foundation is mainly to help sculpture in general and my work in particular. And it's been going now 3 or 4 years, and we have given, I don't know how many, probably 40 or 50 scholarships of a few thousand a year to young sculptors beginning. It's given to Leeds, I forget how much, but nearly $1 million, something like that, to help it